You have been petting your cat wrong, probably for years, possibly for its entire life. Not cruelly, not carelessly, with love, complete, sincere, totally well-intentioned love, with the kind of touch that feels, from the inside, like the most natural expression of affection available to a human hand. The long stroke down the back, the scratch behind the ears, the belly rub that seemed like such a good idea right up until the moment it very suddenly wasn't. And your cat has been telling you, in a language so consistent and so clear that it borders on patient, exactly what it thinks of your technique. Every time its tail began its slow, dissatisfied sweep, every time its skin rippled under your hand like a wave moving away from contact, every time it turned and looked at your hand with an expression that, if it belonged to a person, you would describe as deeply unimpressed. Every time it stood up and walked away from what you genuinely believed was a pleasant interaction and left you sitting there wondering what just happened. Something has been happening in those moments that goes far deeper than a cat being finicky or difficult or proving the stereotype of feline inscrutability. Something that behavioral science has spent years trying to map, and that, once you understand it, changes every future interaction you will ever have with your cat. Not by making touch less frequent, by making it so much better that your cat will begin seeking it rather than tolerating it. But here's the thing. The biggest mistake most owners make when petting their cat is not the one you're expecting. It's not about location, or pressure, or duration. It's something that happens before the hand even makes contact. And it is the key to everything else in this story. Stay with me. Because what is coming later, the science behind why cats respond the way they do to being touched, and what it reveals about their inner experience, is genuinely extraordinary. Let's begin with the body itself. Because your cat's skin is not a uniform surface. It is not an undifferentiated landscape, where touch registers with equal welcome at every point. It is a map, a highly specific, neurologically complex map, where different regions carry different densities of nerve endings, different associations built from evolutionary history, and radically different emotional responses to the same quality of touch. Understanding this map is the difference between petting a cat and communicating with one. And most owners have been navigating it without the map their entire lives. The areas your cat most consistently welcomes touch are concentrated around the head and face. Specifically, the base of the ears, the cheeks just behind the whisker pads, the area under the chin, and the forehead running between the eyes toward the top of the skull. These regions carry the highest concentration of scent glands, those same sebaceous glands we explored in the bunting story, and stimulating them. Through touch produces a response in your cat's brain that is not simply physical pleasure. It activates the same neural pathways involved in the cat's own marking behavior. It produces a neurochemical experience that sits at the intersection of comfort, security, and social affiliation. When you scratch gently at the base of your cat's ears or stroke the cheeks behind its whiskers, you're not just touching it pleasantly. You're engaging a system that is wired at a biological level for positive social experience, for the particular warmth of being in contact with a trusted being, for something that its brain encodes not just as nice, but as belonging. Something deeper is happening when your cat leans into your hand at those specific spots than simple physical enjoyment. Its brain is speaking to it in the language of safety and connection that those glands and those neural pathways have always been associated with. And it is your hand that is doing the speaking. Now let's talk about the back. Because the long stroke down the back, from neck to tail, repeated in long, smooth, confident passes, is probably the most common petting behavior in the world. It is what most people do automatically when a cat comes near them. It is what children are taught. It is the default. And for many cats in many contexts, it is genuinely welcome. Cats that are highly bonded to their owners, cats with more tolerant temperaments, cats whose early socialization included a great deal of human handling, these cats often enjoy the long backstroke. Their spines curve slightly upward into the contact. Their eyes go soft. They may begin to purr. But here is what most owners don't realize about this same gesture applied in the wrong context, at the wrong moment with the wrong cat. The long stroke down the back moves across a region of the body that carries, alongside its physical nerve endings, a very ancient set of associations that have nothing to do with comfort. The back, particularly the mid-back and the area just above the tail, is heavily innervated with sensory nerves that are exquisitely sensitive to the kind of contact that, in a cat's evolutionary history, preceded being grabbed. Being pinned, being restrained by a predator or a rival, the pressure and movement of a hand running along the spine, particularly if it moves with any speed or force, can activate these ancient alarm associations, even in a cat that is otherwise relaxed, producing that characteristic skin ripple, or the sudden swishing of the tail, or the rapid escalation from apparent contentment to the bite that owners describe. Bewildered, as coming out of nowhere. It did not come from nowhere. It came from a system that your stroking hand had been slowly winding up, stroke by stroke, until the threshold was crossed and the response became unavoidable. What most owners don't realize is that the long backstroke is not a neutral default. It is a specific gesture that requires the right cat, the right moment, and the right reading of the feedback the cat is giving. And that without those conditions, it can move from welcome to activating faster than most people expect. And this is where it gets interesting. Because the belly, that soft, exposed, achingly inviting expanse of fur that your cat occasionally presents to you by rolling onto its back with its paws in the air, deserves its own chapter in this story. Because no other part of cat-human touch has produced more confusion, more misread signals, and more sudden, startling consequences than this one. Your cat rolls onto its back, it looks at you. The belly is right there. It seems in every visual and contextual cue available to human social interpretation, like an invitation, like a cat saying, "Here, touch this, I trust you, this is fine." And then you reach for it, and something goes wrong very quickly. Here's what actually happened. The belly roll, that sprawling, exposed, completely vulnerable posture, is a trust display, a genuine, biologically real, deeply meaningful trust display. Your cat is showing you its most vulnerable surface, the one it would never expose to anything it hadn't completely assessed as safe. It is telling you, in the clearest body language available to it, that you are trusted. But here's the thing. Showing you the belly and inviting you to touch the belly are not the same communication. Not even close. The belly of a cat is the most sensorially sensitive region of its body. The fur there is finer. The skin beneath it is thinner. The nerve endings are more densely concentrated. And beneath that skin, with only the cage of the ribs and the soft musculature of the abdomen between them and the outside world, are the organs, the kidneys, the stomach, the intestines, that no small predator, at any point in the hundreds of millions of years of evolutionary history that produced your cat, has ever allowed an uncertain being to touch. The belly roll says, "I trust you enough to show you this." It does not say, "I trust you enough to have you reach for it." The distinction is enormous, and missing it, reaching for the belly because it was presented, is one of the most reliable ways to transform a moment of genuine feline trust into a startling and confusing confrontation. What the belly roll is actually inviting, when it invites anything, is exactly what it looks like. Presence, witnessing. The acknowledgement of the trust being, displayed without the imposition of contact that the display does not request. You can speak to it softly, you can slow blink and return. You can simply be there, in the particular quality of calm presence your cat is expressing its trust in. And occasionally, with cats that are very highly bonded, in moments of peak comfort and security, a very light, very brief touch at the very edge of the belly, offered and then withdrawn before it can become uncomfortable, will be tolerated and even welcomed. But it must be invited by the cat's response to the offer, never assumed from the display alone. Now let's go to the most important part of this story, the part I mentioned at the beginning, the mistake that happens before the hand makes contact, the one that undermines more petting interactions than any question of location or pressure or duration, the reach. Watch how most people initiate petting their cat. The cat is somewhere nearby, sitting, maybe, or resting in a loaf position. The person sees it. The desire to connect rises naturally and immediately, and the hand moves from the person's body toward the cat, descending from above toward whatever part of the cat is most accessible, usually the top of the head, usually fairly directly, usually without pausing to gather any information about whether the cat, in this particular moment, is interested. And from your cat's perspective, this is what happened. Something large descended from above, the direction from which aerial predators historically appear, in a movement it did not initiate and was not asked about. The first information it received about the incoming contact was from above, which is the least socially safe angle of approach in the entire feline sensory vocabulary. And then contact occurred before consent was established. This is not a dramatic series of events. It happens dozens of times a day in most cat households, and the cats, most of the time, tolerate it because they love their owners, and because tolerance is often the easiest available option, and because the reach does not always produce an unpleasant experience, just an unsolicited one. But here's what the research shows about the cumulative effect of these unsolicited reaches over time. Studies comparing cat-owner interactions in which cats were allowed to initiate contact versus interactions in which contact was owner-initiated found measurably different outcomes across virtually every metric of the interaction. Quality. The cats that were approached rather than approached produced shorter interactions. They showed more stress indicators during contact. They were less likely to show affiliative behaviors like rubbing and purring. And over time, they were less likely to approach their owners voluntarily. The cats that approached on their own terms showed the opposite pattern across every measure. Longer, warmer, more mutually satisfying interactions, more purring, more leaning, more of the specifically sought-out contact that every cat owner hopes for and so few consistently receive. What most owners don't realize is that the single most effective change they can make to their petting life with their cat costs nothing and requires no new technique. It requires only this: stop. Before you reach, stop. Extend your hand low at the cat's level with the back of your fingers presented rather than the palm descending. And wait. Give your cat 3 seconds, 5, 10. Let it make the first movement toward contact. Let the approach be its own. The touch that follows from that pause will be different in quality from any touch you have imposed. Different for you, because you will feel it received rather than merely tolerated. And measurably, physiologically different for your cat, because every measure of stress and comfort and neurochemical response shifts when contact is chosen rather than imposed. The pause is everything. It is the whole grammar of the interaction established before a single stroke has been made. And this is where the story becomes something that I think matters far beyond the practical question of where and how to pet your cat. What we are really talking about when we talk about petting correctly is listening. The kind of listening that does not use ears, the kind that uses eyes, watching the tail, reading the skin, tracking the tension in the posture or the softening of the eyes, the kind that uses restraint, the willingness to stop before you. Want to stop? To read the signal that says enough before it escalates into the signal that says, I told you so. Research into cat-owner relationships has found something beautiful buried in the data on touch quality and interaction outcomes. The owners whose cats sought them out most consistently, who were approached voluntarily, touched freely, chosen again and again as the destination for affiliative contact, were not the owners who petted most. They were the owners who listened best, who had developed, through attention and respect and the daily practice of noticing, an accurate model of what their specific cat wanted in each specific moment. They had become fluent, not in a generic cat language, but in the specific, individual, entirely personal language of their particular cat. The one that says, here is good, there is not, this much and no more, now I want to come back for another moment, now I am done. And their cats, who had learned that these particular humans could be, trusted to hear and honor what was being said, those cats became more open, more willing, more expressive in their desire for contact. Because desire for contact in a cat is always proportional to confidence that the contact will be what it wanted, not what the human decided it needed, what the cat itself reached for. The irony at the heart of this whole story is this: you will receive more of your cat's touch, more of the warm, sought-after, genuinely willing contact that you want, by petting it less but better, by asking before taking, by reading before touching, by making every interaction something your cat walked into freely rather than something that arrived at it from above. So here is what changes today. One thing, just one. Before you pet your cat, before the hand moves, before the reach begins, before contact of any kind is initiated, offer. Extend the back of your hand, low, near your cat's nose level, close enough to be noticed but not close enough to be imposing. And let the silence of those 3 seconds be the most important part of the interaction. What your cat does in those 3 seconds is the whole answer. The nose that drops toward your fingers, the slow gravitational lean of a head moving toward the offered hand, the small deliberate closing of the remaining distance, making the contact its own act, its own choice, its own arrival, or the quiet non-response, the gaze that slides elsewhere, the body that settles a little more firmly, in place, without moving toward you. The polite, clear, completely valid answer of not right now, which is not rejection, which is not coldness, which is simply the honest expression of a being that trusts you enough to tell you the truth about what it wants in this moment. Both answers are good answers. Both answers are your cat speaking to you clearly in a language you are now equipped to hear. Both answers, received with the patience they deserve, build something between you that no amount of imposed stroking ever could. Trust. The particular irreplaceable trust of a cat that has learned that your hands always ask before they take, that your presence never costs it anything it wasn't willing to give, that close to you is safe in the most complete and specific sense of that word. Safe to approach, safe to touch, safe to want. Your cat has been silently grading every interaction since the day you met. Not harshly, not with any wish to find you wanting, but with the honest, consistent, completely sincere evaluation of a being whose inner world is organized around the question of safety. You have the grades now. You know what they measure. You know what earns the highest one. Go earn it. Every day. In the 3-second pause before your hand moves, everything your cat has to give you begins right there. If this story changed the way you will reach for your cat today, share it with someone who loves their cat and has been wondering why the belly rub keeps going wrong. And if you want to keep learning the full language of touch and trust with your cat, stay right here. There will always be more to discover.